I'm Michael Fox, and this is Prospector News Podcast. And joining me, I have Peter Krauth of the Silver Stock Investor. Welcome, Peter.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here and chatting with you.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you on board. We are going to take a look at the month of July and how it affected the precious metals and the various ETFs. Seasonality generally would dictate that July should be a slow down month for the precious metals, but not this year.
That's absolutely right. I mean, if we look at gold and silver, they've actually done quite well. It looks like we had at least an intermediate term bottom that looks like it was put in for gold, at least in late June, that last week of June. And then for silver, I would say probably very similar, right around the exact same time. Very last few trading days of the month of June.
Yeah, both those metals, they've been in this box forever. Are we finally gonna, break open the box and see what's inside?
Obviously, a great question, and one nobody knows the answer to. We can only give our opinions, and I still think it's kind of early to say. If I obviously, I think like probably most of my colleagues follow closely what central banks are doing, and the Fed just had its rate hike last week, was deliberate in not leading the market towards thinking that they had ended their series of hikes, that they are simply going on a meeting to meeting basis, looking at data, and are unwilling to commit either way. And I've got to say that, if I look at, it's almost on a daily basis that you get, I'm going to say bullish support, news-wise, economic news, if you want, it depends how you look at it, but let's just say news that would suggest a possible follow-on rate hike, not necessarily in September, but at in sort of a near-term future Fed meeting, FOMC meeting. As much as the next day you'll get news that would suggest the opposite. And so I think that that's where precious metals are taking their cues, and simply are in a little bit of a no man's zone, where they're kind of floating around and waiting for clear indication. The dollar, even itself, in the last, I'm going to say, probably month or so, has had a small rebound where it went below the 100 level in the US dollar index. And so we're currently north of 101.50, 101.60, slightly higher. And so that's interesting, in fact, in the way that we've had this little rally in the dollar index, and yet gold and silver actually have rallied pretty much at the same time in the past month. That, it's very short term. It's just been about a month, but it is encouraging because the precious metals tend to, especially silver in particular. I mean, I know because silver I follow even more closely than gold, but if you look back over the last 20 years, silver is about 80% negatively correlated to the US dollar. Now, that's obviously over a longer term, but but even on shorter term basis, you do tend to get pretty clear opposite reactions. And in the past month, you haven't had that. So, I mean, I guess intuitively what it's telling me is that, yes, there's a possibility of another rate hike. Odds are very much that we're much closer to the end of rate hikes than a beginning. So maybe one, maybe two more, if you want to keep, your mind open to the possibility. And I think that the precious metals markets are seeing that, sniffing that out, and gold and silver are kind of realizing that we are close to the end of that hiking cycle. And I think they are pretty much waiting for that clear shot, salvo, I guess you want to call it, that, okay, now bets are off. This is finally it. We are done with hikes. And It doesn't mean that they have to, that the precious metals will get that signal only when it somehow becomes official that the Fed has said it. They tend to react in advance of that. So it wouldn't surprise me if we do get a final I guess a clear final breakout in the precious metals before the Fed comes out and says it publicly, maybe 6 months in advance of that. But I think that that's what is kind of holding them back. They're waiting for that sort of final conclusion, I guess, in the market that that's what they're sensing has happened, and they're not there yet. So I'm not sure we're going to see a breakout. I don't think that has been sort of decided yet by the markets.
I noticed that silver had outperformed gold in the month of July as well. That gold and silver ratio had dropped actually below the 80 point for the first time in a considerable length of time. And I was wondering, in your take on why silver had outperformed gold for the month.
I think that there's a couple of things. One is certainly the odds were on its side because it had been hovering above 80 for a while, and as history has told us that it typically does not last. When the gold silver ratio gets above 80, it tends to be a really good time to watch it and wait for it to start to break below. And when it does, you tend to get a more pronounced move in the in silver at that point. And so as to why, I think part of it is its relationship with the dollar. Actually, I take that back. We just talked about how the dollar rallied at the same time, so that would absolutely not explain it. I think it's more silver having been more undervalued relative to gold. And I think it's also, we are getting increasingly, and this I do follow very closely, we are getting increasingly bullish reads from the industrial side of silver in terms of demand for silver going through the next perhaps decade or two. In terms of the requirements of silver with this entire green transition shift, that I think that is starting to filter down into the silver market, and that is really starting to get priced in. So I think the industrial side, silver really has become more of an industrial metal. That's been the case for, say, 50, 60 years, but the last 10 to 15 years has, I think, shifted even further. And if we look farther ahead, that's probably that trend will probably continue.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. There's a lot more silver needed in the new green economy than has been in the old economy. And I've openly opined with people that the silver copper ratio may eventually become more of a gauge than the gold silver ratio is.
That makes sense. Copper being such a great economic indicator, you would expect as silver becomes more important industrially, that it would tend to follow copper more closely than it had in the past, given both being in silver's case, increasingly industrially important, and copper being clearly an industrial metal. So yes, I would agree that their future behavior would tend to become a lot more similar. Absolutely.
Now, as we look forward into August, into the precious metals, typically around mid-August is when that seasonal down bias occurs and breaks, and the metals start to move on the upside. Is that to be expected again this year, or have we thrown the cards up in the air and had a game of 52 pickup and we don't know what's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think to be honest, I think it's probably somewhat more of the latter, that it is the case of 52 pickup, because I think that given how these metals prices have behaved in the last month, and it really does look like clear bottom was put in seasonally at the end of June. I do think that I would expect August to be more of a sideways month, and that as we get into sort of early fall and more clarity comes around what's likely with following Fed meetings with potential rate hikes, that the clarity around that will help determine or help potentially push the precious metals higher if we get the kind of sentiment and sense from those meetings that we are one additional step closer to the end of hikes. And so you take away uncertainty, gain certainty, and potentially get more upside action in the metals at that point. I would expect August to remain somewhat quiet in that respect. It's a long shot, but that's, I'm going to say, at least the sense that I have of it right now.
On to the poor miners. The metals keep going up and the miners just keep spinning their wheels and going nowhere. And it doesn't appear that July was any bit better for them. If I look at the GDX, GDXJ, SIL, SILV, they're essentially flat again for the month.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at, I'm looking right now at GDX, for example. I mean, it started July. You're right, they are close to where they started. So GDX started around $30.50. We're at 31.46. As I'm looking at the chart right now, it's been higher, 32.50. So it's down from its highs. It is slightly up from where it started the month, and it has come off from mid-month, but we still are a little bit above. And what I find encouraging is that at least for GDX and GDXJ, both of these have their 50-day moving averages remain above the 200-day moving averages. Technically, that's bullish. GDX right now is trading above its 50-day moving average, also bullish. GDXJ, let me just very quickly look at a shorter term chart, which says the same thing actually as GDX. So both have their 50-day moving averages above their 200-day. Both are really currently trading above those 50-day moving averages. So on a technical basis, both are behaving relatively well. When you look at the SIL and then the SILJ, unfortunately, you're not getting quite the bullish sentiment that you're getting in gold. If you look at the SILJ, for example, its 50-day moving average is below the 200-day. However, price-wise, you've had a considerably bigger move from the low, which was put in the first few days of July versus where we are right now. And it's very close to its 200-day. So the 50 days below the 200-day, but the move up from the start of the month, it looks like it's actually sustained itself better than it has in the case of GDX and GDXJ. So longer term, or I'm going to say medium past, it's a little bit less strong than GDX and GDXJ, but near term, recent term, silver has been actually a little bit stronger in terms of its coming off of the bottom at the start of July. So that's encouraging. And especially again with the dollar actually having trended up over that same time span. It's too early, I think, to get too excited, but something I look at as well are the momentum indicators, like what we call the RSI and the MACD technical indicators. The MACD has been confirming this move higher, so that's quite bullish. And the RSI is pretty much in the middle or slightly above 50 or so, which is also, I'm going to say, mildly bullish in both cases. So to me, that suggests that we have there's you know, the SIL and SILJ have legs to move higher. That's how I would put it, over the next, say, month or couple of months. So, you know, obviously barring any kind of shocks, I think that we could see sustained moves higher. There's something else that I look at, which is the sentiment through outstanding shares in the SIL, or sorry, in the SLV ETF, which reflects the price of silver. And the SLV ETF has moved up, as you'd expect. The price of the units have moved up with the price of silver. But the outstanding shares in that ETF, meaning how bullish people are with the ETF. So they've actually been selling off quite markedly. We're at the lowest point we've been in, wow, I mean, I'm looking back at 2020. So you'd have to go back to about May or June of 2020 to see the same number of outstanding shares in the SLV ETF. And yet the price has gone from, at that same point in time, the SLV was trading at about $16. And today we're at about $22.30. So SLV, which reflects the silver price, is much higher than it was at the last point when it had the same number of outstanding shares, which goes back almost 3 years. So that says to me, there's clear negative sentiment in the silver market. There's, I'm going to say, almost disdain for silver in the silver market. And yet that looks like a tremendous opportunity, because the silver price has been performing very much opposite to the sentiment in the market. Silver has, you know, if you compare 22 versus 16, that's 50% higher than it was 3 years ago. And yet, same number of outstanding shares. That just speaks to huge opportunity for me. I'm not saying silver's, you know, going to blast higher, but if you have a contrarian streak in you, you'd want to be accumulating silver and silver stocks. And given the rebalancing that we saw at the end of June in SILJ, a bunch of these juniors got dramatically sold off. There was no fundamental reason for it. It was all because of a big seller came in, SILJ, and rebalanced. And there were some tremendous bargains, and those stocks have come up dramatically from there. So you have to be very opportunistic. That's really what the silver market is about.
Yeah, definitely. I heard of some really significant, what we refer to as stink bids that actually got filled during that period of rebalancing, and some were so bad of a bid that they never thought for a million years that they'd get filled, and they did. So good on those people and taking advantage of that opportunity. But given what you just said, is that a sign that we maybe have reached that capitulation in the marketplace and have a bottom?
I would say, you know, you never, obviously you never know. I mean, if I came to you and said, Michael, this is it, absolutely jump in, both hands, put everything you have. I'd be crazy, and I wouldn't recommend it. But that said, if you are somewhat contrarian, this is a tremendously contrarian signal. My suggestion would be, it's a tremendous time to start at least layering in, start making, whether it's silver or silver stocks, start making at least buy in tranches at this point. Set yourself an amount, a number, whether it's a stock or physical silver. Set yourself an amount, and over the next, my suggestion would be over the next weeks and maybe couple of months, start to deploy that capital in thirds or in quarters, and watch it, be strategic about it, look for weakness, wait for weakness, and then make additional buys to add up to your final desired total purchase. And I think that after the next couple of months, odds are really strong that you're going to see the overall value of that allocation be higher than your starting amount. The odds are really certainly look like they're in the favor of someone who's going to start making those kinds of purchases now.
Definitely. And as we speak about opportunities for the silver market, you and I are both going to be in attendance. You're speaking, I believe, at the Silver Symposium, which is being held in Las Vegas, Nevada this year, the Silver State, September the 29th to October the 1st. If you have the opportunity and you're a silver bug, you should probably book your room at Caesars and come join Peter and I in Vegas.
Yeah, that'll be my first time. I'm certainly looking forward to it. It is one of the very few silver-only events that I know of. It's a great place to be. I expect to meet a lot of silver bugs there, and I think it's a fantastic forum. Lots of silver juniors will be there. Even some sort of mid-tier producers will also be there presenting. If you want to know more about the silver market, as you said, Mike, I think that's a tremendous place to be, and you'll probably have some fun at the same time in that city. But there'll be a lot of information imparted to attendees about the silver market, about the potential, and I think that it's, whether you're a novice in this sector or you're a seasoned investor in this sector, I think there's going to be a lot of information to be gleaned from it. And I think it'll be very beneficial. I'm certainly excited and looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back there. Rob puts on an outstanding event and has an excellent lineup of speakers to talk on the silver markets. And if people want to get a hold of you, how would they do so, Peter?
So I'm going to say there are a few ways. If you want to follow my work, I did want to mention that last year I published a book called A Great Silver Bull. And to just quickly mention that was my way of giving my overview of the entire silver market, from the history and the demand and supply side of things, all the way to what the investment opportunities are and how you'd go about it, and even ultimately how and when you'd want to sell. So that's one way, the Great Silver Bull. Otherwise, you've got, for real time, I'm going to say real time following of the silver market and silver sector, my newsletter, Silver Stock Investor, which you can find at silverstockinvestor.com. And I'm available, or it can be, you can follow my work on X now, as opposed to Twitter, at Peter_Krauth. That's Krauth. I'm also on LinkedIn, Peter Krauth, and those are the best ways. I'm happy to connect with followers, and happy to keep following the silver space and imparting what I learned to anyone who's interested.
Yes, those links will be at the bottom of the description of this podcast. And Peter, thank you very much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you down in Vegas.
Mike, it's been a pleasure as always, and I certainly look forward to that as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Peter. The Prospector News podcast is for educational purposes only. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and are not to be taken as investment advice. Listeners need to do their own due diligence and seek advice of a licensed investment advisor.